Well, as a first step, it would probably make sense to have a new widget, a new screen to which we can navigate. Because the idea, of course, is to fully replace the content on this screen with the content of a brand new screen, the screen that shows us the recipes for that category. Hence, it's time for a new widget and therefore a new file. And you can name this however you want. I'll name it category meals.dart or category meals underscore screen to be consistent with my other file here, the category screen. So this will be the screen which shows us the meals for a chosen category. In there, let's add a stateless widget, which should have a name of category meals screen to basically fit our file name. And as always, import material Dart in there. Now, for the moment, to simply see something and work on that transition, let's just output a centered text here, which should display the recipes for the category. And we'll learn how to go there and how to pass data like the title of the selected category in a second. So now we got this new screen. How can we reach it from our categories screen? Well, actually, there's one more thing we should do here. We should, of course, use a scaffold and put this centered widget into the body of the scaffold, and also maybe add an app bar where we can show a title. And that title here will be the recipes, but of course, maybe we want to actually soon show the category name here instead of the recipes. So how can we now go to that category meals screen? In the end, we want to make sure that in the categories screen, we can tap a category item. So instead of the category item, we need to be able to tap these items. That, I guess, makes sense. To make them tappable, container doesn't have an on-tap argument or anything like that, but we can wrap container with a new widget. So let's use the refactoring tool to wrap it with a new widget. And there we could use a gesture detector, because a gesture detector allows us to add on tap, on double tap, and many other listeners so that we can execute functions when a user taps or double taps or whatever our elements. But it would be nice to also have some visual feedback, so instead of a gesture detector, I'll use an inkwell. Inkwell is a widget which I briefly mentioned earlier in the course. It's basically a gesture detector which also fires off a ripple effect. So this material design effect you have when you tap something, where you have these waves coming out of the point where you tapped it. You can also add on tap here, but now you can also configure the ripple effect. For example, you can set the splash color, so the color of these waves, and for that I'll use my theme color, and there the primary color, simply by tapping into the theme with theme of context. And also set a border radius, maybe of border radius circular 15. Actually, not maybe, but it should match the border radius of your card, of your container, so that these waves nicely follow the shape of the container. So the border radius up here for the inkwell should match the border radius down there for the container. And you can simply set a different border radius to see the difference and why you might want to align them. Well, and with that, we just have to make sure that something happens on tap. And that something is, of course, that we want to go to a different page. How can we do this? Well, we can add a method here, which you can give any name you want. I'll name it select category. And in there, we can now use a tool Flutter gives us to change the page. So let's hook up on tap here to select category without parentheses. We don't want to call this when this gets parsed, but when the user taps here. And in select category, we now use a feature which I also mentioned earlier before, but which we only have briefly used, and that's the navigator. The navigator is a class, or a navigator here is a class built into Flutter, which helps you with, well, navigating between your screens. That's the core idea. Like theme or media query, it needs to be connected to the context, because you might remember that context is this object which has information about this widget and its position in the widget tree. And of course, something like that is super important for the navigator to know, because it needs to know what the current screen is so that it can add this page you want to go to as a screen on top of it. And what do I mean with as a screen on top of it, though? In mobile apps, and therefore also in Flutter apps, but not just there, when we navigate between pages, like a products and a product page, we typically do this by managing these pages as a stack of pages. And what's a stack? A stack basically is a list, you could say. The idea here simply is that when we go to the product page, we actually add this product page to the list, and when we go back from it, we remove it from the list. And you can imagine this list as being in a three-dimensional space where you always see the last or the topmost item of that stack. So the topmost page is visible. So if we add the product page on the stack and the products page was already there, the product page is now visible because it's the latest and therefore the topmost page. Therefore, we also speak of pushing and popping pages. We push a new page onto the stack so that it's the topmost page, and if we want to go back, we pop it off there. So in our code, this means that we now use the navigator here to push a new page. Now, before we do that, we need to make sure that we have context available here, so we should accept it here as an argument, and I'll name it CTX here to avoid confusion with this context. You wouldn't have to rename it. It's only there to, as I said, avoid confusion. And since I need the context here, we need to bind on tap to an anonymous function and now forward the context we get here by Flutter to select category when this anonymous function is triggered. So now back to the navigator. Now with the navigator set up and connected to the context, we can use push and pop on it. Now pop doesn't make sense here because we don't want to remove a page from the stack. Instead, we want to add a new one. Now you have various versions of pushing. You can push named pages. That's a feature I'll come back to later. You can also push and replace pages. That means that instead of adding a page on the stack or on top of the stack, you add it, but you remove the page below it. So you still only have one page in your list then instead of two. And that means that you won't be able to go back from that new page because you deleted the page you were coming from. We'll see use cases for this later too. Here, however, I'll push and keep the page we were on. And now what do we push here though? You don't push your widget you want to go to. So you don't add your category meals screen here. That's not what you add here. Instead, you add a material page route. And yes, there also is a Cupertino page route if you want to handle both. For now, I'll focus on the material page route, though the Cupertino route will work in the same way. The material page route is a class which you have to instantiate by adding parentheses, so by calling its constructor. And of course, it's available because we have that Flutter material Dart import at the top. Now, as you see, we can configure 4 things here. Important for us is the builder, which defines which widget should be built with the help of material page route. We need material page route as a wrapper, so to say, to handle things like the animation from the old page to the new page and so on. Full screen dialog is a boolean which you can set to control whether you want to have that default animation where the new page kind of slides in, or if it should basically be a full screen overlay rather. And settings will become important later. We can ignore it for now. Same is true for maintain state. We don't need that at the moment. So let's add a builder. And the builder here gets a context passed in automatically because, again, the function you provide for a builder here is now executed by Flutter. And here I'll name the context just C, or actually use an underscore since I won't need it. And now in here, we have to return the widget, which should be used as a new page now. And here the idea, of course, is to return our category meals screen. So for that, we now need to import it with a relative import path here from our category underscore meals underscore screen.dart file. And of course, we instantiate it here. So with this, we are creating our new screen as part of this material page route. And with the help of push on the navigator, we should be able to go there. So with that, let's do a full refresh here with the green arrow and go back to our application. Back here in our application, click a category. And what you see is that you now get this transition to this recipes page. Of course, to the same page for all categories, but still. And you automatically get a back button up there. And of course, on Android devices, you can also use this back button. So that's now, of course, really nice because now we can switch to a brand new page and we automatically got this back functionality managed by Flutter so that we can also go back to the categories page here.